Here's a question almost nobody asks. We talk endlessly about what ancient humans ate, how they hunted, how they built shelters, how they raised children, how they buried their dead. We study their tools, their social structures, their migrations, their beliefs. Whole academic careers are built on understanding prehistoric life in detail, but almost nobody asks the obvious one: how did they stay clean? Not in the vague sense of, well, they probably swam in rivers sometimes. In the real, daily, practical sense. What did they do about dirt? About grease? About the basic fact of living in a body that sweats and produces oil and waste constantly, with no plumbing, no soap, no clean towels, no running water, and no one around who had ever read a hygiene guide? The answer is more clever and more interesting than most people expect. Ancient humans did not just give up on cleanliness. They built habits, tools, and even rituals around it, going back further than almost any other part of human culture. Some of these methods were genuinely effective. Some were inventive in ways modern people might find strange. And some reveal something deeper about why humans care about being clean at all, before looking at what ancient humans did. It helps to understand what they were actually dealing with, because their hygiene problems weren't the same as ours. Modern people build up a specific kind of dirt, skin oils, dead skin, pollution, and the byproducts of bacteria feeding on processed food residue and synthetic fabrics. A nomadic hunter-gatherer dealt with something different: more dust and soil, more animal fat and blood from preparing food, more plant residue, and a different mix of bacteria shaped by constant contact with rivers, soil, and animals, and clean itself meant something different. For us, cleanliness is partly about appearance, partly about social signaling, and partly about health. For ancient humans, it was almost entirely practical. You removed dirt because it was uncomfortable, because it attracted insects or parasites, because it got in the way of work, or because the group expected it. The idea of cleanliness, as a moral virtue or a sign of civilization, came much later. Human skin is more self-sufficient than people realize, partly because modern hygiene habits get in the way of that self-maintenance. Skin produces sebum, a natural oil that moisturizes and helps block harmful bacteria. It also carries its own community of microbes that, left alone, helps keep harmful bacteria in check. And it constantly sheds dead cells, which carries surface dirt away with it, without soap stripping those natural oils away. Skin settles into a different balance, not dirtier in some absolute sense, just different. That was the normal human state for almost all of our history, but people still helped the process along. Oil was one of the most common and effective ancient cleaning tools. Oil dissolves oil, so rubbing oil onto the skin and then scraping it off, along with sweat, dirt, and dead skin, actually works. The Greeks and Romans turned this into a formal practice. Athletes coated themselves in olive oil before exercise, then scraped it off afterward with a curved metal tool called a strigil. This wasn't just for show. It's genuinely effective cleaning, and it worked on the same chemistry we still rely on today. Romans apparently valued the scraped-off oil enough to bottle and sell it as a skin treatment, which says a lot about Roman business instincts. This wasn't only a Mediterranean idea. Across sub-Saharan Africa, people used plant oils and animal fats the same way. In the Arctic, where water-based washing was often impossible in the cold, oil from marine animals served the same purpose. In South Asia, sesame and mustard oils did the job. Different oils, same basic trick: oil lifts oil. And scraping it off takes the dirt with it. Cold water without soap doesn't actually remove much oily dirt. It rinses away loose material but can't break down the oily layer trapped against the skin. That's exactly why soap exists. It bridges water and oil so the water can carry the oil away, without soap. Ancient people made water work harder through scrubbing, using hands, rough plants, sand, or fine gravel to physically rub dirt off the skin. It's the same basic idea behind modern exfoliation, and done thoroughly. It works reasonably well. Warm water helps even more since heat softens the oily layer and makes it easier to remove. Hot springs were used wherever they existed. Japan's tradition of bathing in natural hot springs, for example, goes back long before written history. There's also evidence that people deliberately heated water by dropping fire-heated stones into containers. Going back to the Neolithic period or earlier, soap-like substances date back roughly 4,500 years to Mesopotamia. or clay tablets describe a mix of animal fat and wood ash used to wash wool, and likely the body too. Egyptian records from around 1550 BCE describe something similar. Oils mixed with alkaline salts for washing. The chemistry here is real. Wood ash or natron, a natural salt used widely in Egypt, reacts with fat in a process called saponification, which is, quite literally, how soap is made. Rome had a full soap industry. The ruins of Pompeii include an actual soap factory, showing soap was produced commercially. Roman soap, made from tallow and ash, was used for cleaning fabric, washing the body, and even as a hair product. Roman writers credited Celtic tribes with making especially good soap from animal fat and plant ash, and using it to style their hair. Not just clean it. Even so, soap stayed expensive and unevenly available for most of human history. Most people, most of the time, clean themselves without it. The scalp has a dense concentration of oil glands, so hair builds up grunt fast and can develop a strong smell and texture if left alone too long. The most basic solution was simply grooming, combing, picking through hair by hand to remove dirt and parasites. Fine-tooth combs made of bone, ivory, shell, and wood show up in the archaeological record at least 5,000 years back, and almost certainly existed earlier in materials that didn't survive. This kind of mutual grooming, similar to what we see in other primates, likely served a social bonding role too. Plant-based hair washing shows up almost everywhere. Many plants contain saponins, natural compounds that lather and act as mild surfactants. Soapwort, soap bark, soapberry, yucca root, even the names tell you what they were used for. Indigenous peoples across the Americas used yucca lather. Various African communities use crushed soapberry fruit. In Asia, the shikakai plant, still used in Ayurvedic hair care today, did the same job. These plant cleansers are gentler than manufactured soap. They clean without stripping hair completely bare of its natural oils. Clay deserves its own mention. Clay particles naturally attract oily and organic material, pulling it out of hair or skin like a magnet when applied and rinsed off. This isn't folklore, it's real chemistry. And clays like Moroccan Rasoul and various kaolin types are still used in cosmetics today for exactly this reason. Plaque is bacteria living on your teeth, feeding on food residue and producing the acid that causes cavities and the gas that causes bad breath. The fix has always been mechanical, physically disrupt that bacterial layer before it does damage. Ancient people didn't have plastic toothbrushes, but they had chew sticks, twigs chewed at one end until the fibers separated into a brush. This wasn't a weak substitute. Twigs from the Salvadora persica tree, the toothbrush tree, contain natural antibacterial compounds, a mild abrasive, silica, and sodium bicarbonate. Studies comparing chew sticks to modern toothbrushes have found similar effectiveness at removing plaque, and the World Health Organization has formally recognized them as a legitimate hygiene tool. Their use shows up across sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia for thousands of years, and they're still used today. Tooth powders existed too. Ancient Egyptian recipes combine ground oxhoof ash, myrrh eggshell powder, and pumice, giving an abrasive for scrubbing, antimicrobial myrrh and ash to neutralize the acid bacteria produce. Romans used powdered charcoal and bark. Greek physicians recommended fine salt or burnt animal bone ash. Different ingredients, same underlying idea: scrub the bacteria off and counter the acid. And that idea was correct. In many ancient cultures, bathing wasn't really a private act, it was social. Roman bathhouses, the thermae, weren't just about getting clean. They were gathering places for conversation, business, and community life. The largest could hold thousands of people at once, with hot rooms, pools, gardens, and even libraries. Admission was cheap or free, and going regularly was close to universal across social classes. The hammam tradition, which grew out of Roman bathing culture and spread across the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia, kept that same idea, a place for washing, but also for relaxing, socializing, and marking life events like weddings. The architecture itself, domed steam rooms, marble, soft light, was built to make washing genuinely pleasant, not just functional. Other traditions tied washing directly to spiritual life. The Jewish mikveh, ritual immersion in specific water. Hindu ritual bathing in sacred rivers. The fact that so many unrelated cultures linked physical washing to spiritual purity isn't a coincidence or reflects a shared human sense that cleaning yourself means something beyond just removing dirt, improperly handled human waste spreads disease, cholera, typhoid, various parasites, and historically this has killed more people than almost anything else. Managing it mattered for survival, not just comfort. Nomadic groups had it relatively easy. They moved often enough that waste never built up in one place long enough to become a health hazard. The real challenge began once people settled down, and the solutions were often impressive. The Indus Valley Civilization, around 4,500 years ago, had individual household toilets connected to covered brick sewers running beneath the streets, genuinely advanced engineering. On par with sanitation systems, many cities didn't match again until the 1800s. Rome built the Cloaca Maxima, a major sewer draining into the Tiber, plus public latrines that again doubled as social spaces. Long before germ theory existed, people had clearly noticed that living near your own waste made you sick, and engineered around that observation. Ancient humans weren't careless about cleanliness. They weren't sitting in filth waiting for modern plumbing to save them. They were resourceful and often surprisingly sophisticated in solving real problems that bodies present. They scraped oil and grime off their skin with metal tools, and it worked. They washed their hair with plant lathers that cleaned without stripping it bare. They cleaned their teeth with treated twigs that modern studies confirm are genuinely effective. They built sewers and bathhouses that solved public health problems we didn't properly solve, again until the 19th century. And they wove washing into social life, spirituality, architecture, and pleasure, turning a chore into something communities built themselves around. Were they as clean as someone today who showers daily with soap and brushes with fluoride toothpaste? No, modern hygiene, modern water infrastructure, and germ theory genuinely changed outcomes. Fewer infections, better dental health, longer lives. That gap is real, but it's not a gap between no hygiene and hygiene. It's a gap between one set of solutions and a better set of solutions to the same problem people have always had. You have a body. The body gets dirty and you live around other people who notice. So you figure something out, just like humans always have.